Hello Nippies, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hi, hello, I'm Nips, a freelance artist. And first of all, happy holidays, happy new year. Hopefully you guys had a good set of days and a great start to 2023. Today we're going to be working on an expression sheet for GB ASMR's D&D character, Bearthier. And if you don't know who GB is, she's an incredible friend of the channel. She does ASMR, and if you haven't heard of GB ASMR, really, are you living on YouTube? Where are you living? Under a rock, clearly. I'm gonna put her socials down below. She's super sweet, super skilled, does a lot of cool content on her channel, so go check her out. And we have a lot of cool collab videos together, so if you want to check those out, I'll probably share some of those below as well. And I had the pleasure of being able to draw her D&D character for her birthday, and I was just so excited. I absolutely love drawing expressions. I love drawing my OCs as well, and just trying to bring characters to life in general. And before I continue, I am filming this in a new style. New year, new us, you know? A lot of you have suggested that my speed paints, when sped up, are kind of an eyesore because everything just goes really fast. It's hard to digest, and I am going to be trying this type of method for this video. Let me know what you guys think down below. It's slower, a little more real time. You can also see my hand to see how my brush strokes and everything else goes. It's not the best as far as capture quality. It doesn't look as good as it does by screen recording, but I really enjoy how this looks, so let me know down below. What I could also do is split the video in two parts in the same video, put it like this at the beginning, and then just have a quick speed paint at the end in case you want to see the actual colors or something. But yeah, just a thought. So as we dive into the character sheet, I struggled so much with this sheet because usually when I do expression sheets, which if you haven't seen my recent streams and my recent project for my webcomic Offsell, which if you don't know exists, I'll put the links down below for that as well. I have been doing character expression sheets for the website, and I will link down below the specific page where all my expression sheets are located. If you want to see some, maybe I'll flash some on screen, not sure. But they basically have the same layout of 6 faces. We have 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. It usually includes one little chibi just to be cute and comical. And for this one specifically, I didn't have much time and I really wanted to do it in color. And so it was challenging because, I mean, if you know anything about the artist struggle, is sometimes you just take it too far. You just want to keep going. And so I tried my best to not only keep it sketchy, but keep it kind of clean, and then be able to not need a line art layer to have to do the sketch, do the line art, do the color, then shade the color. And so that's one thing, and you'll see more or less once we get there. But back to what I was saying earlier is that I really struggled with the sheet because normally when I do these, or when I have done these recently, it's pretty easy to create the 6 expressions because I know exactly what my characters look like, and they do in almost every scenario. And this was a whole new character for me. And thank God that GB really puts a lot of care and love into her character creations and character design. So I was able to get a pretty good idea about how this character is, but it's still a little difficult because, you know, there's still an area that it's not as personal to me as it is to her. So I can only do so much to bring her baby to life. And so I do have some references in the bottom right. You'll see in an app called PureRef, which is absolutely amazing if you guys need an app as an artist digitally to have your refs on screen constantly on top, and just you can even create files for references so you don't have to constantly open them up. It's incredible program. And so at least I had some visuals of artists who she had commissioned for her character, so I had something to work with. And this character is a very beautiful elf, And he is very intelligent and is kind of a know-it-all and is very confident in that regard. And I really wanted to show all of those sides while still trying to keep him in character. And one of the things I really struggle with, you'll see in the top left that I'm really trying to get this like know-it-all expression, and I'm really struggling with which way to kind of deliver that without looking too out of character. And I remember having read some of the sheets that GB sent me, because thank God she had so many questions answered for the character. She had the backstory, the descriptions all laid out, and there was a point where I misread some of the information and I thought that this character was way more wholesome than they actually were. And so you'll probably notice later as we get more into the honing of the expressions that the top right one gets slightly less like wholesome from what I remember, because they're more of like, not sly, but just like a little less like warm than that. And so here you see that we're doing a little bit more of the sheet, trying to flesh out the character. And one of the things that I really struggle with is pretty characters. I do not draw those well. I fail pretty miserably at making things look dainty and pretty. A lot of the things that I draw, if you've seen a lot of my art, is just the kind of like rough edginess and just like, there's so much going on. It's so hard for me to do pretty things. And one of the biggest descriptions of this character is how pretty they were. And so I was going to be so worried, because not only do I not have any personal ties and knowledge of this character, but I now have to make them very pretty. And so I was kind of panicking. And on top of that, I don't have much time. So there really was a lot of improvisation and a lot of trusting the process in this drawing. And so the bottom left, we have that kind of confident looking down at you, kind of like the pathetic look, but a little bit more cheeky than that with a smile instead. And then the bottom right was supposed to be kind of a sad emotion. And one of the things that GB mentioned was that he doesn't really, his expressions are very subtle. He's not super emotive. And so I really wanted an array of emotions, but keep it as subtle as possible. And it was so difficult, because a lot of what I tried to equate this character to was Diego. And for those of you that don't know who that is, that's like one of my characters from my webcomic. And Diego is a very stoic kind of character. And he's the type of character that if you move his eyebrows some micromillimeters up or down or sideways or bend them, his entire expression changes, because he's literally not emotive at all. But from what I read about this character, it's not that extreme. So I tried my best to kind of channel a little bit of Diego without pushing it to almost absolutely no emotion type of stoicism. So it was kind of hard to know whether or not I had gone too far, because of what I explained earlier, like who is this character really in my mind. And one of the things that usually happens when I get commissioned for OCs, especially where there's no fan art, that's like, there's no like personal creative ties, so to speak, to the person who's commissioning me, I try my best to inject myself and my artistic vision into the character without imposing myself onto the character, which is really difficult, because I feel like in order for some of my art to work, I have to do that. But I don't want to take away from how personal the character is to someone, and I never want to draw them out of character, you know what I mean? So I always struggle when drawing people's OCs to keep it like as close to how the creator intended. without basically turning it into my character. So you'll see me kind of struggle with that pretty often. Drawing that line is just so difficult. So here we go. The struggle commences. So you'll see here that I actually start doing line art. And I told you guys at the beginning of the video that I don't do line art for this. And here is where I realize the time crunch that I'm in, because I'm doing this the day before her birthday, and I really do not have enough time to make this look as beautiful as I want it to. And I waited that long because I was gonna do something completely different. And then she basically was like, well, if you're gonna draw something, can you draw me this? And I was like, well, there's barely any time to make it in time, but you know, your wish is my command, and of course. So I decided to do it anyway, but I had to make some compromises a little bit in style in order to be able to make it in time. And I'm not gonna lie, I think the quote unquote compromises actually made it look better than if I had just straight up done it the way I had it planned. And I think that's because it felt just so much more loose and organic than if I had gone in and done the lines. I'm a huge line art person. I absolutely love line art, but there's something really beautiful about just painting. So you'll see here that I did the lines and I started to just put flats. I set my sketch layer to a warmer color, and then I set it to multiply, and I started filling out flats under. And this is an art style that I actually tried in another video, and it's an art style that I mess with kind of frequently, which is I try to get the cleanest sketch possible without line art. This is kind of like an art style that I usually try for when I want to avoid doing line art and I'm more of in a quick mood. So I'll try to get the cleanest sketch possible, and then I'll set that sketch to multiply and start doing my flats under. I'll set sample shadows, so I'll still keep the layers separated. I'll do a multiply layer on top of the color to kind of get an idea of where more or less the shadows are going to be. And then what I'll do is I'll merge the whole thing. I will literally merge the whole thing and just start painting on top. Of course, you know, we leave the spare copies of the layers all separated, all together, everything, just in case anything goes wrong. Because, you know, sometimes it happens. Like, you keep painting and you go and you go and you go. And if you don't save the process and everything beforehand, not just to, you know, as a foolproof, but to also compare, you know, where you started and where you ended, right? It's always so crucial to kind of just observe yourself along the way. And so if you have that, then you're pretty much good to experiment and do anything. I feel like there's less pressure to experiment and do a lot of things if you just constantly save progress of your work. It just feels like there's, you know, a safety backup when you do that. So because I had that safety backup, I decided to go ahead and add the flats to absolutely everything. And mind you, when I did the flats for the first one, it was more to send GB a progress report of the piece, just so she can see more or less how it looks, what she thought, and if I was kind of nailing the expressions and stuff. I didn't want to, you know, go too far into the piece without being able to get her baby's expressions correct. And so after I did that, though, I kind of just decided to keep going. I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit, and that's why I only did the first one, because like I said, it was only as a progress report. But I decided, why not? Why not? And I was getting really frustrated with the line art, and I'm kind of glad that I had this thought, because when I went into it, I didn't originally intend to work with this art style. My original intention was to do the sketch, do the lines. As you saw, I started doing the line art. And once I got kind of frustrated with the lines because they weren't exactly coming out the way I wanted to, it felt like the sketch just had more life. And I'm pretty sure There's a lot of artists out there that's probably happened to, sometimes you just work on the sketch and it has so much more energy than when you start putting the lines down, and it just doesn't work out. I don't know, sometimes it doesn't work out. So I started doing the lines and I decided to send it to GB like that. And when I saw it with the flats, I was like, wait a minute, what if we just kept it like this and just kind of moved on? So here you'll see me just starting to go with the flow and completing all of them. And once I added the flats, I then needed to decide how rendered did I want this to be. Because usually when you do this art style, at least for me, I cannot render it too much because it looks really kind of messy and loose. And the neater, quote unquote, I make it, the more charm it loses. I don't have enough experience in sketch rendering. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't know how to describe it. It's more like, it's a refined, like there are people who have refined that craft, where they do like the sketchy painting and it just looks absolutely beautiful. And I am not skilled enough yet and practiced enough yet in this art style to be able to pull it off in a way that is like makes the drawing look refined and finished. And so I needed to make sure that if I was going to do this, I needed to keep the shading to an absolute minimum and keep it to kind of only put shadows kind of where necessary to show volume, right? So you see kind of under the bangs, I have parts like behind the bangs, under the ponytail. I also have them in some parts outside of the ponytail in order to kind of bring the drawing on the inside, to just close it up. So there are parts where in your composition, you kind of want to put a shadow in a certain spot in order to bring the viewer's eyes into a direction, like into the drawing usually. You don't want to lead the audience's eyes outside of the frame, usually, There's a way to break the rules, right? So I was trying to find ways to do that. And as I went on, I was wondering how much I was going to clean up the sketch, because like I said, I didn't want to clean this drawing up too much, but there were so many like squiggles and lines and scribbles everywhere that I was like, is it going to look really bad if I leave this here? And so I kind of like, as I put more and more colors, they kind of grew on me. I kind of really liked how the messy scribbles looked everywhere. It's almost like it became part of the drawing. And I'm pretty sure there are some of you out there that can relate to this, because I don't know if there's any of you that sketch in color, like color pencil, like IRL, or even digitally, and you pick just like this really pretty color that goes with your final drawing. And it ends up just kind of looking so nice with your original drawing that you kind of just leave it there. You make it really opaque, or you just kind of like leave it super saturated and dark and do this like really kind of rough looking drawing. And it just looks so cool. Like sometimes it looks better when you leave it than when you take it off. So it kind of evolved into that situation with this. And I really enjoyed it. And I was really enjoying how everything was falling into place, because if this experiment didn't go the way that I wanted to, I would have to start over, because there's absolutely no way that I'm going to be creating something for GB's birthday and that it is going to be ugly and half-assed. And so I definitely would have had to redo this if I did not like the final product of this kind of half experimentation. So yeah, I'm really glad that it turned out pretty well, and I'm pretty proud of these. One of the things that I really I didn't want to experiment too much with this, because if this one would have gone wrong, I also would have had to start over, and there were too many experiments already happening at the same time. So I was like, let's not go too far into that, but I really want to get better at color theory. And I always say this, but there are people who are just so good at color theory that just put the right colors in the right places, and they absolutely do not need like more than 3 colors to make a piece really pop to life. And that just comes with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and practice and everything. And that's something I really want to work towards. And it looks beautiful in sketches where it's mostly just flat colors and just a very, very slight gradient. It looks so beautiful. Hopefully you guys know exactly what I'm talking. I know some of you have had to see this sort of like quote unquote like art style, like coloring, rendering style, but it's just like all flat colors, very, very minimal gradients, minimal highlights, minimal shadows, and it just looks like the most intricate piece of shading and rendering you've ever seen. But when you really count the colors, it's like a maximum of like 10, if anything like 5. And it's just honestly incredible. And so I wanted to not experiment too much with the colors, but I definitely wanted to kind of implement those really subtle gradients and keep it dynamic, but maintain kind of the sketchy flat color vibe as well. I feel like I was trying to do too much with this drawing. I was like, I want it to look rendered, but I don't want to render it, but I want to sketch it, but also it needs to look really finished, but also I really want it to be super expressive, but also it needs to stay really sketchy. So there was a lot going on in my mind. And so here you'll see me try and, really refine the hair pieces, really refine the faces, expressions, and try and get that beauty that the character really has. And when I do my expression sheets, at first they weren't really like that, but as of late they've really become that, where the top middle drawing is usually the largest, and it's the one where the expression is the most indicative of the character's kind of whole essence, really. And for Barathier, I wouldn't say that this picture like summarizes really Barathier in general, but I think because GB really noted how his beauty was a big part of the character, I really wanted this one to just be large, larger than the rest, and really just looking at you, staring into your soul, and just make him as beautiful as I could. And there was like a kind of androgynous sort of like ethereal beauty that she described, and so I was really focusing on this one. I felt like if I could nail this expression, then everything else was going to be really easy. So I was working really hard to make this one just as immaculate as I could without nitpicking at it, without going too far into the rendering and just really screwing the whole thing up. So yeah. And as I continue, I start adding the highlights to the gold, and I remember thinking when I started adding the highlights to the gold that I was gonna run into a problem of over-rendering. And I really had to ask myself how much I wanted to render this piece again. I was like, do I actually add more shadows to the drawing? Do I add more highlights? And so you'll see me here move on to something else, like start doing the backgrounds, trying to get an idea of what the drawing is going to look like finished. Because I noticed that if I kept rendering that, I was just gonna go too far. So I was like, let me not touch this anymore and let me move somewhere else. Let me get an idea of what the picture is just looking like completed so I can more or less work backwards. And I think that's one thing that has really helped me a lot in terms of giving me an idea of how I want to render something, is working backwards. And I feel like it's really hard to explain this because it's very dependent on your own process as an artist. So you have to figure out your own process and what parts of your process kind of constitute your flow, so that way you can pick the stage that you're at and then look forward and pick an adequate stage from later down the line in your own process that will help you figure out an earlier stage. And so hopefully that wasn't super convoluted. But hopefully, like if you have A through E, in your process and you want to get to fucking D maybe, and you don't know what B and C is, just figure out the D part in your process and then work backwards to find out C and B. So I sometimes do that because if I'm experimenting, usually it's very hard for me to figure out how I want to proceed, especially if I have things like a time crunch. If there's no time crunch and there's no like pressure, so to speak, I don't usually do the working backwards because it's more about experimenting than getting a specific product. So if I'm really just trying to let loose and experiment, I'll just kind of do things and see where the road leads me. But I think in this one, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted the finished product to look like, and I wanted a certain type of rendering. So in order to prevent myself from going too far into my B and C steps, I decided to just skip ahead to my D, E, F stages so that it can give me, a better idea of how far to go in the other ones. And so I don't know if that anybody else does that. Hopefully those explanations weren't too convoluted and there's somebody out there that understands what I'm talking about. And for me here, it's basically getting those background colors done, especially in these where you're doing an expression sheet. And I don't know how you guys do your expression sheets or your character sheets in general, but when I've been doing these as of late, I pretty much do like a solid background and I do some like little shapes behind each expression, maybe like a heart and some like, like ellipses, or, little 3 lines. If they're, sweaty, you do little drops like coming out of the character and stuff. And those are like cute little accents to be outside of the character. And so I do the little shapes in color. You see there the circle on the top left. We have some squares and rectangles on the bottom left and right. And just picking out the colors for those, picking out the color for the background, really getting the general composition down. Then I work my way in. Kind of like a puzzle, right? Like you're doing a puzzle IRL and you do the borders. That's a good, wait, now that I think about it, that's a great way to put it. I kind of found a way to describe it as I'm commentating. So yeah, basically you do your outer borders of the puzzle and then you work your way in, and it makes things a lot easier to figure out. So yeah. And you'll see here how I did the bottom right, where it's the first one that I started with the shadows because I knew that one was going to be my most complicated one. And the reason I knew it was going to be my most complicated one was because when I originally sketched it, I knew that the sad expression in the pose that I had him in was going to have his whole face in shadow. So I knew that basically the same thing again, right? Like I have the border of my puzzle is whatever the rendering of this piece is going to be. And because this is going to be the most complex piece, I don't want the other ones to be any more than that. So I use this drawing to basically be my limit, like no more than this. It cannot look more rendered than this because if not, we're going to be here all day. So once I got to a satisfied part in rendition, kind of in that drawing, I decided to just move on over to the more quote unquote simple ones. And so it was really fun, like just bringing this character to life. It felt more and more real the more I put colors and I started really rendering out the shapes of the face, the shadows, and really bringing those eyes, the cheeks, and really the facial expressions are they're just my absolute favorite to draw. You know, when you can finally just look at a character drawn out and that it feels really, really real and tangible. It's just, there's no greater feeling for me. And I know everybody has their own kind of goal in art and what really makes them feel fulfilled. And this is definitely it for me. So I was really, really happy when this character finally started to come to life in my own art style. And I tried my best not to think about how bad I might be butchering this character, because at the end of the day, it's not mine. So because of the time crunch and because, I really wanted this to look good, I tried my best not to think about it, because the more I thought about it, I think the worse it would have gone, because you know what happens, you overthink and it kind of puts you in paralysis. And so I did my best to keep the character's personality in mind and basically let myself just take over. And I'm very, very lucky that GB, for some reason, trusts me super blindly. And she told me, she's like, "Bestie, just go. I just want you to draw anything. And so just go with it. I trust you." So it's an honor, to be trusted with someone's OC, because if any of you have original characters, you know these characters are your babies. And so sometimes it really just puts more and more pressure on me, because I know what it's like to have OCs, right? I have a lot of them and they're all my children, and man, it's just, I know I want my children to be treated right. And so I really wanted to get this character correct. And so the more and more I finished it, I was really proud of this piece. There's a lot that I learned from it, just staying loose, experimenting with colors, and just reminding myself that as somebody that really, really loves like super clean line work, if you guys have seen my art before, been familiar with it, you guys know how anal I am with very, very clean lines. And this sheet, and some of the other recent videos that I've done experimenting with this art style, maybe I'll put it in the top right for you guys to see, is just a constant reminder that you don't need to fully render and detail and clean every single thing that you draw. And it doesn't mean that because you render it more, it will automatically be better. And art pieces, can be just as good without that sort of thing, and they can feel just as dynamic, just as special, just as good. And so this really reminded me of that, that things can be loose, that things can be quote unquote messy and still look really, really beautiful. So yeah, it was a great learning lesson. I'm very honored to have been able to draw GB's character. Go wish her a late happy birthday if you haven't already. December 19th was her birthday. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully I didn't ramble on for too long and bored you. Let me know what you guys thought about this new filming style. Is it better than the speed paint video? Do you guys prefer that one instead? Or do you prefer a combination of both? Would you like to see both the speed paint and this in one video so you can see how it looks, on my screen directly? I have no idea. If you guys like this or not, let me know down in the comments below. Any suggestions you have. I have a lot of cool videos hopefully planned soon. And some backlogged speed paint videos. I've been streaming a lot on Twitch, so you can check me out there as well. And I will put the links to GB stuff and my comic down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy New Year's again. Happy holidays. Hopefully you guys continue having a great day and the rest of 2023. And I will see you guys next video. Bye.